人にござります。
Do you ever find yourself lying awake at night thinking about the GameCube's least used peripherals, or is that just me? Of course, you had the infamous DK bongos and the Game Boy link cable, but you also had the GameCube microphone, which was only used in a small handful of games for the console. It plugged into the memory card port, which I always found somewhat interesting, and was only used in a couple of Mario Party games and the subject of today's video, Odama. I have to assume that nobody has heard of Odama, but it's one of the last games Nintendo published themselves for the GameCube just before Twilight Princess and the Wii came out. But growing up with the GameCube, especially toward the end of its lifespan, Odama always stuck with me as a bit of a curiosity. It was briefly advertised in Nintendo Power magazines, and I can recall seeing its big box microphone bundles sitting on store shelves for years. Of course, at the time, I wasn't even sure what it was, and I skipped it like I assume most people did, but I've always been curious to just go back and check it out. And after a bit of research, it turned out that Yuut Saito, the little-known developer behind Seaman for the Dreamcast, was responsible for Odama. Seaman is notorious for being so exceptionally strange, and Odama I think is also pretty strange in its own way. I don't know much about the guy's history, but it's obvious that he was into voice commands at the time, as both games share that similarity. But despite its classification as an official Nintendo IP, I would say Odama is long forgotten, and one of the few games on the GameCube that I think most people would never even assume is made by Nintendo. As far as I understand, Nintendo themselves went out of their way to publish this game with Miyamoto's involvement, so it has to have been interesting at least somewhat. With that said, I've got a brand new copy of Odama right here, and we're gonna crack it open and see what it's all about. Of course, cracking open a brand new GameCube game isn't something I get to do that often, so I had to record it. Sadly, it looks like this copy did take some damage in the last 20 years or so it took for me to get to it, but it's easy to forget how these fresh game cases can just feel after years of buying used ones. Odama originally was packaged alongside the GameCube microphone, but the one I have is used, and so I don't have the snazzy clip that was meant to attach to your controller. It's not that important, but I used a 3D printed stand instead. So here we are, Odama. To put it simply, Odama is a pinball game set in feudal Japan. Obviously, the premise is a bit strange, but the game is clearly aware of how ridiculous that concept might sound. The intro gives off a real tongue-in-cheek vibe, making this overly serious history of war alongside old portraits of warlords and an elderly Japanese narrator.
それでは親方様、いざ出陣にござります。
The idea is that you have to command the Yamanouchi army and carry a magical Ninten bell to the enemy's castle. I have to assume the name of your clan, the Yamanouchi, is also a play on the late president of Nintendo, Hiroshi Yamauchi. In every level, you guide the titular Odama around with flippers, just like a pinball, while commanding your army with directions via the microphone. Your mileage may vary with the pinball controls themselves, as honestly, I can't speak to it too much. The last time I played a pinball game was probably on Windows XP. To clear a level, you need to bring the Ninten bell to the other side of the stage by clearing the way and deploying soldiers. That's the basic idea, but there are a lot of things to consider all at once. Advancing your troops is easier said than done, as the enemy armies are seemingly infinite and will respawn periodically as you take space. At the same time, the number of troops in conflict will show up beside the bell, and if the number of enemy soldiers exceeds your own, the bell will begin to move backwards. If the bell is pushed back behind your flippers, you fail the mission, and if you run out of time or balls, you'll lose as well. And so you have to use that handy microphone to advance your bell when needed or rally your troops toward targets. Voice prompts like press forward or rally are taught to you through these little tutorials, and you can earn more by collecting scrolls. Of course, this is all happening while you try to manipulate a moving pinball to do basically anything. The flippers are the only thing in your direct control, so you have to swing the Odama around to clear enemy blockades, gather items, or destroy fortifications. This all creates a really unique balancing act. You have to maintain the position of the ball, keeping an eye on where it is so you don't drop it, while at the same time, you have to destroy targets with it efficiently or your army will fall back. I found myself in a lot of precarious situations with the Odama, where it wasn't where I needed it to be, and I had to rush as quick as I could to gather items or support my army. And all the while, you're commanding the troops to make sure that they don't get overwhelmed, or worse, run out of morale and start ignoring your directions. Lining it up and hitting things consistently was a major part of the challenge, but thankfully you can manipulate the board a little by tilting the stick, which helps a lot moving the ball where you want it to be. Even the first level was trouble for me to pass while I was trying to get a grip on how things actually get done. Each stage will give you a specific tactic to execute. Here you have to use the Odama to hit the gate and close the river off so that you can move your troops across safely. But with how chaotic the gameplay can be, it's really easy to accidentally reopen that gate and cut your own troops off. You need to remember to command the bell to move forward whenever there's an opening, and to use the Odama quickly to carefully take out enemies. It's also really important to take advantage of the items that you can pick up. Rice balls can be used to boost the morale of your units, and the green orbs will power up your Odama, letting you roll over troops to steal them for your own army. The heart pickups turn your bell white, which you can strike with the Odama to ring and knock down surrounding enemies, while also powering up. There are also horses that you can use to summon cavalry to help break through enemy lines, and hourglasses which give you extra time. The game is built in a way where it's absolutely necessary to use all of these tools as much as you can if you want any chance at success. On multiple occasions, I'd forget to use my items, miss too many shots, and just end up in a sort of stalemate where I had too few soldiers and had to juggle protecting the bell while gathering more items and troops. It's really important to also remember those voice commands, because if you say the wrong thing, they might not really understand what you're doing. I do want to just briefly talk about the presentation in Odama. Considering the scale of the things that are happening all at once with this game, it's not too surprising that the game is a little bit bland in its look, but I do think with a little work this game could have had a really cool visual style. It's worth noting that the GameCube, I guess, also excelled at this idea of running with a bunch of different characters all at once, and some of the earliest tech demos of the machine had a bunch of Marios running around. So I think in a way it's impressive that there's so much happening at once with the game. That one key illustration that's used on the cover is actually pretty great, and I wish the game looked a little bit more like that. But something as simple as boosting the saturation and contrast in post like this actually looks pretty good. I just bring this up because I really feel like if Odama had a more interesting visual style, it might have been less forgotten today. As it is, it's just serviceable. Altogether, Odama actually isn't that long, with 3 major acts, each concluding with a boss fight. These boss battles actually end up being some of the highlights of the game, even if they tended to be pretty difficult to clear. The first area has this 2-tiered field where you destroy a fort to knock them down, and then send your troops to jump onto them, sort of like in Pikmin. In Odama, if you use your tools correctly and line your shots up right, levels can be completed in moments, but the game can be incredibly punishing as well. When it works, the process of juggling between your units and pinball can be hectic and fun, but every few levels I'd get stuck for quite a while. The game just doesn't take it easy on you, and there aren't really any difficulty options to learn levels with, so you just have to figure it out on your own. The narrator will try to give you a little brief on what to do when you reach a new area, but these explanations are often not enough to properly understand the objective. That, alongside some genuinely questionable game design choices, made Odama feel pretty obtuse. There's a part of me, though, that feels like the game is built in a way that makes things harder than they needed to be. For starters, the Odama can actively hurt your own army more than it helps, because the red troops are only safe from it when it's powered up and glowing green. That meant dozens of times where I'd make a bad shot and mistakenly wipe out half of my army. Another thing I'd wish just wasn't a thing were the hitboxes on the bell carriers. Ringing the bell is essential to taking space and advancing, but these half-naked dudes that move the bell around aren't just for show, and they have an active hitbox that can prevent you from ringing the bell from behind. This is made much worse in a handful of stages where there's a clear choke point that makes maneuvering around much harder. With how much is going on in-game, visibility can also be a big problem. There's just so much happening, and it's made even worse by the waves of speech bubbles coming from your soldiers, who often aren't actually saying anything meaningful and just make it harder to see. I was having a lot of fun with Odama when it felt like controlled chaos, but a lot of these weird decisions just take it closer to that line of frustration. When you get stuck in a level for ages only to lose from some freak accident, or a handful of mistakes push you all the way back to the start of the level, it can feel devastating. But after enough patience and practice, I would eventually make my way through some of the game's harder maps and into the final area. And it turned out that the last 3 maps were actually some of my favorites. Maybe it was just because I had figured things out at that point, or more likely the game just has weirdly scaled difficulty, but I started to learn and appreciate the small tricks that you could implement to get the upper hand. Using the rice balls as a diversion as opposed to a morale booster was pretty cool, and I also learned that you could deploy units to catch your Odama just before it falls out. I always appreciate when a game allows you to flex your knowledge of its mechanics. The voice commands, too, started to make more sense as time went on, and I could tell from just looking at the battlefield whether I needed to charge, fall back, or push forward. I probably said press forward into this microphone 100 times. Partway through, I sort of realized that all of these commands could have been accomplished with an option wheel, but on the other hand, it does add a little bit of tension as you're desperately trying to yell at your troops to get things done. But like I said, after struggling with some of those really difficult levels like that awful spider boss, the final stages were pretty great. Karasuma Town had this really cool gimmick where the flippers moved alongside the bell, and the whole area was almost built like a little maze. So you get to direct the bell between different paths, and really get to flex your ability to adapt to problems. And honestly, the best part was just that I didn't have to snipe some specific angle to actually get something done. Levels like this one and the following Karasuma Road actually made me feel like there was a lot more to what Odama was getting at. It could have been really cool to expand on the commands at your disposal, or just have a little more direct control over your squad. I think actually instructing the army to split up, take a flank, or hold a target would have been really cool to see. When Odama finds that little Venn diagram space between attacking with the ball and managing the army, it creates a really unique sort of gameplay style that I can't say anything has ever done before. When it comes to the endgame, there isn't that much to spoil with Odama, but there was a really fun surprise during the final boss. It's a simple stage, you just knock down the general and then send your troops to attack them, but there aren't any items in this stage to refuel with. Instead, you have to enter this door at the center of the building, and when you do so, the Odama gets sent to modern-day Japan, with Nintendo's headquarters at the center of a new board. So instead of conscripting enemy soldiers here, you're grabbing random office workers to join your cause. Honestly, I'd have loved to see a version of this game where you just terrorize a city with a giant pinball. Crushing cars and toppling buildings was actually a lot more fun than knocking over the forts in the main game. But after all is said and done, you take down the general and reclaim Karasuma Keep. The Nintendo bell is rung and the souls of the fallen soldiers are returned. And that's about it for Odama. It's a simple end for a simple story, but check out this credit song. So after finishing the game, would I call Odama a forgotten masterpiece? Absolutely not. But it has a style of game that is so unique, and I can't say I've seen anywhere else. Considering this is one of the last mainline Nintendo games released for the GameCube, I am glad that I gave it the time of day. It's actually an incredibly short game when you get down to it, and most of my playtime was actually spent on the handful of difficult levels that I got stuck on. If I didn't count any of my losses, I probably would have taken just a few hours to beat the whole thing. Odama is simple enough in its gameplay that I think a level designer could have gone really far here, but I think that was out of the scope of the project. It's just that when you finish the game, there's actually no bonus features whatsoever. Instead, you just unlock a free play mode, and that's about it. But really, this game is a perfect candidate for a Switch 2 port. Considering the console already has a microphone on it, why not? I don't think Odama is really worth going out of your way to picking up a used copy, but if it was on a service that you happen to pay for already, I think it would have been worth a try. But that was my experience with Odama for the GameCube, and I just want to thank you for watching to the end of the video. If you did enjoy hanging out here, I'd really appreciate it if you gave the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stuff like this in the future, and hit the hype button if that shows up for you. I'd love to hear if you've ever even heard of this game before or played it yourself, and since you made it to the end of the video, type in Odama in all caps in the comments to let me know that you actually made it here. That's all I've got for today, so thank you once again for watching, and take care.